Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take our sources and, well, really get into them to see what insights we can pull out.
That's right.
Today, we're focusing on a really interesting list that Japanese vocabulary for different occupations.
Mm-hmm.
We've got the works here, kanji, hiragana, romaji, and the English meanings.
Yeah. Whole set.
And our mission, you could say, is to look past just the English words. We want to explore the nuances, maybe some cultural clues hidden in these terms.
It could be any of those aha moments.
Exactly. Like,
Yeah.
how are different roles actually perceived or grouped over there? Could this list tell us something deeper about Japanese work culture?
I think it absolutely can. It's a great place to start. And one of the first things that really jumps out is how often you see multiple Japanese words for what we might just call one thing in English.
Right, like doctor or teacher.
Exactly. It suggests, a more detailed way of looking at roles, maybe different responsibilities, or perhaps even a bit of history that one English word just smooths over.
Okay, so let's unpack some of those. Where should we start? How about nurse?
Good one.
The list has I, kangofu, marked as female nurse, and then yu, kangoshi, just nurse.
Hmm.
So what's the significance of having those two?
Well, that first one, Kengo-fu, that character Ifu, it traditionally means woman.
Ah,
So that points pretty clearly to a time when nursing was, well, predominantly seen as a woman's job.
makes sense historically.
But then you see Kangoshi, that she character. It often crops up in words for skilled professionals, like teachers or doctors.
So a shift.
A definite shift. It suggests nursing becoming viewed as a profession requiring specific skills, open to anyone, regardless of gender. It kind of mirrors that broader move towards inclusivity you see everywhere.
That's really clear. Language reflecting social change right there.
Exactly.
Okay, what about teacher? We've got Kurshi and Oya sensei. Both translate to teacher.
Right.
But I get the feeling Oyu is bigger, used more widely.
Absolutely. You've got it. Kyushi is typically, someone teaching in a school, their main job, formal education context, usually.
Okay.
But udifi, sensei, that's a term of respect. It gets used way more broadly. Doctors, lawyers, artists, skilled craftspeople.
Really? So like a master carpenter could be a sensei.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
Especially if they're teaching an apprentice or are highly respected for their skill. Some people link it back to Confucian ideas about respecting elders and experts.
Yeah.
It elevates that role of mentor, someone with knowledge.
That adds a whole different dimension. You wouldn't call your doctor Kyushi, but you definitely call them sensei.
Precisely.
Okay, moving into the arts. We see grak for painter artist and they, just for artist.
Mm.
Is there a subtle difference there, like scope or maybe prestige?
That's a good question. Kaka, with that character for picture or painting, is quite specific. It points directly to someone who paints, right? Whereas kero, geijutsu ka, kero, geijutsu, means art in a much broader sense. So that term could cover sculptors, musicians, maybe even digital artists. It feels wider, maybe acknowledging a contribution to the arts landscape as a whole.
Interesting distinction, like our painter versus artist, but maybe a bit more defined.
Could be.
All right, let's look at policing. 3 terms here. Keiga, keika, keisatsukan, and kamawari-san, all listed as policemen.
Yeah, quite a range.
What's going on there? Different levels of formality.
That's definitely part of it. Keikanai and keisatsukan are both pretty formal. You might feel slightly more official because it uses the full word for police, okay?
Kisatsu.
Okay, the standard terms.
But eri-san, amawari-san, is the really interesting one.
Why is that?
It's the san ending. That's a polite, often friendly suffix you add to names.
It's like Mr. or Miss, but maybe warmer. Exactly. And omawari literally relates to patrolling, making rounds. So paints this picture of the friendly neighborhood cop, the local Bobby on the beat, someone approachable.
Ah, so it hints at the relationship with the community.
Definitely suggests a different vibe than the more formal, perhaps more distant Iya.
That's a great little window into social dynamics. Okay, chefs and cooks. We've got koku, shifu, shushishi, edishi, iri, jurishu.
Wow, yeah, that's a lot.
Looks like a whole kitchen hierarchy laid out in vocabulary.
You've absolutely hit the nail on the head. Koku and shifu are pretty clearly loan words.
From English and French, presumably.
Right. And just like here, shifu often implies a higher status, the head person. Koku might be more general cook.
Okay, what about the others?
Shurishi is a common term, often implies someone licensed or certified. Shuri shurutin literally means cooking person, another general term for a cook or chef.
And ers, ririricho. That cho ending often means head or chief, right?
Exactly. That's your head chef, the master chef, the boss of the kitchen. The range really shows the different levels of skill, responsibility, maybe even prestige in the field world.
Fascinating. Now, performers. Hayu is actor-performer. To, Joyu is actress. And yakusha is actress-performer. So they have a specific word just for actresses.
Yes, Soju-jo is explicitly female. The dosho character means woman. Gotochu is often used generally for actors of any gender these days.
And toju yakusha? Any difference there?
Yakusha can sometimes carry a slightly different nuance. Maybe someone more deeply invested in the craft of acting, possibly with ties to more traditional forms like kabuki, though it's used broadly too.
Interesting how gender gets marked sometimes and not others.
It is, yeah.
Now, kantoku is listed for movie director, sports coach, and supervisor superintendent.
That's a wide range.
It seems like a really broad term. What's the common thread linking those roles?
The core idea seems to be about overseeing, guiding, managing.
Ah, okay. Leadership.
Exactly. Whether you're directing actors, coaching athletes, or supervising a construction site, the kantoku is the one in charge, guiding the effort towards a goal. It's about that leadership function across different fields.
Makes sense. We also saw Yanji, Hatsushi, and Hukoya, both for barber. Any difference implied there? Maybe traditional versus modern?
That's a very likely interpretation. Kokoya often feels more traditional, like the classic corner barbershop. Goethe sounds a bit more formal, perhaps more technical. You might see it on a license or a more modern salon.
Got it. And then for engineer, we have both ishi and the loan word engineer.
Right.
Is obviously from English. What does having both tell us?
Well, it really shows how Japanese adapts, especially with technology. Gishi is the native term, engineer or technologist. But as engineering fields globalized, the English word engineer clearly came in and stuck.
Does it carry a slightly different feel? Maybe more modern tech?
Sometimes loan words do pick up slightly different nuances or get associated with specific, perhaps newer fields. It reflects that integration of global tech and terminology.
Okay, let's switch gears a bit and look at how some of these words are built. That ulorin suffix shows up a lot.
It does, doesn't it?
We've got genku, tsinku in bank employee, uju, kumu in civil servant, uru, eki in station worker, hagyu, 10 in shop assistant, hu ikus, kaisha in company employee. The list goes on.
Kaibi in security guard, ichi kenju in researcher, tio hakunsha in temporary worker.
So what's that in doing there? What's its core meaning?
It basically means member or personnel.
Oh, okay. Member of.
Exactly. You attach it to the place or type of organization, bank, government, station, shop, company, and it marks someone as an employee or member of that group.
So it really emphasizes being part of that collective.
Precisely. Which, fits well with the group-oriented nature of many Japanese workplaces.
Right. Now, compare that to the husha suffix. We see it in hushakusha, unemployed person, and furisangyusha, real estate agent. How is sha different from hushe?
Well, kasho often points to a person associated with a certain state, a condition, or maybe an industry or field, rather than necessarily being an employee of one specific company.
So, mushokusha is someone in the state of being unemployed.
Right. And fujisangyusha is someone involved in the industry of real estate. They might run their own business, for example. It's more about their field or status than being staff somewhere specific.
It's like these little suffixes or grammatical clues about how someone relates to their work.
They really are. Very efficient.
Now, we already touched on Meira and Nishirota, but there are quite a few other loan words on this list.
Yeah, a significant number.
Koku and Sheifu, we mentioned earlier, too. Right. What does this wave of loan words tell us about maybe global influence on Japan's workforce and the language describing it?
Oh, it tells us a lot. It really highlights the huge impact of, Western culture and the globalization of jobs, especially after World War II.
As new ways of working came in.
Exactly. New industries, new corporate structures. Often the English terms just got adopted or adapted. Salaryman is maybe the classic example became totally synonymous with that image of the loyal white-collar company man during the big economic boom.
Right, almost a cultural icon in itself.
Definitely. And then Frieder, that's more recent. It's a mix of free and the German word Arbeiter, meaning worker.
Ah, for part-time or temp work.
Yeah, often used for younger people doing that kind of work, maybe moving between jobs. And LL office lady, that reflects a very specific image of female office workers, again, probably influenced by Western office culture at a certain time.
And things like pilot, stewardess, journalist, just direct adoptions.
Pretty much. It's like the language itself is a timeline, recording these economic and cultural shifts, these new ways of working arriving in Japan.
It really is. Each word has a bit of history. Now, what about some of the terms that feel maybe more traditional or distinctly Japanese? Like tusha, yuranai, she fortune teller, boku, pastor clergyman.
Right, roles with a spiritual or divinatory aspect.
Nemichu, Richie fisherman, Ryushi hunter.
Those point to livelihoods tied directly to nature. Very traditional.
Shiteki carpenter, Tante detective, Newman farmer.
Exactly. Daiku represents that essential skilled craft. Tante detective has its own flavor in every culture, but it's there. And Newman, farmer, speaks to the absolute foundation of Japan's history and society. These feel rooted, don't they?
They do. They represent long-standing roles, specific skills, deep connections to certain ways of life. Okay, and finally, there are two terms on this list that aren't really jobs at all. Tikator, Rizutora, and Karushi.
Yeah, those stand out.
Rizutora is listed as restructure corporate downsizing, and Karushi, death from overwork.
Powerful terms.
Their inclusion feels, well, significant. What does it tell us that these concepts are right here alongside job titles?
It's a really crucial point. It gives us a stark, quite sobering look into some of the pressures and, frankly, the darker sides of modern Japanese work culture.
So Rizutora reflects
Economic changes, job insecurity, companies downsizing. It became a common term during periods of economic difficulty.
and Karushi.
Well, it's tragic. It's a recognized social issue in Japan, referring to people literally dying from working excessive hours, from stress, heart attacks, strokes related to overwork. Its presence on a list like this is, yeah, it's poignant. It highlights extreme pressures.
Wow, that really does put the human cost into context, doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
So stepping back and looking at this whole list, all these nuances, the loan words, the suffixes, even those last two difficult terms, what's the big picture for you? What strikes you most about how work is viewed, just based on this vocabulary?
I think it's the level of detail, the granularity,
How so?
the way seemingly similar jobs get broken down, like the different police terms showing formality and community connection, or that clear hierarchy in cooking terms. It's just a really ingrained cultural awareness of different roles, responsibilities, maybe even social standing tied to work.
Right, it's not just a cook, it's which kind of cook.
Exactly. And also that interplay between the traditional Japanese terms and all those loan words, it really paints a picture of a society adapting, integrating global influences, but still holding on to its own ways of classifying things.
It definitely makes you think about our own language, doesn't it? What nuances are buried in English job titles that maybe we don't always notice?
It really does. It makes you realize how the words we use aren't just labels. They shape how we perceive professions, maybe even how we value them.
So wrapping up this deep dive into Japanese occupation words, it's clear it's way more than just a vocabulary list.
Oh, absolutely. It's a window.
A window into cultural values, how society has changed over time, the whole complex world of work.
Yeah. Digging just a little deeper than the simple translation reveals so much about how roles are seen and categorized in Japan.
So we'll leave you with this thought to mull over. How does the specific language a society uses for different jobs actually shape how those jobs are understood and valued? What deeper story about Japan's values or its history might be hiding in this list of words?
Which term caught your attention the most? Which one felt the most revealing, and why? Something to think about.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.